You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to your favorite podcast. It's Barbell Logic, Beast Over Burden. I'm your host, Niki Sims. With me is Andrew Jackson. What's up, Andrew?
Howdy.
Howdy, howdy.
You're getting good at that intro. I think if I had to try to do that, I would not. I would have to take many takes. You just bang. One shot, one kill.
Well, I think when I listen to a podcast, I don't like it when the intros are really long. So I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. Get through the awkward spots. Say hi to your friends.
Mission accomplished.
And start talking about things that are common problems. Let's give some solutions.
Okay. What's on your mind?
On one hand, it's too bad we have to talk about this because it was very traumatic, this thing that we're going to talk about. But on the other side, I'm glad that it is what it is now.
Yeah, and I want to talk about it because I think this is universal. Every single lifter will encounter this at some point in time. And I think it's worth putting out there because somebody might be in the middle of their session right now experiencing it as we speak.
Yeah.
So what happened on your last Saturday leg day?
Yeah. So Saturday leg day, I love Saturday leg day because I get to deadlift. I only deadlift once a week. We were switching up strategy a little bit. So it was a little bit of intensity and getting into volume. I was pretty excited about it. Overall, I just loved leg day. So it's deadlift day, belt squat, hip thrust, and then some leg curl accessories. And it's the weekend. So I get to take my time. It's at the home gym. Love it. So super stoked. And my legs were a bit sore from some other work I've been doing. And I was finally I thought I was feeling recovered.
Well, I think we should add a little bit more commentary on the precursor to this workout.
The precursor to this workout was the entire other 39 years of my life. And and I've been doing this type of leg press variation, which is 1.5 reps. And I've also been really increasing the range of motion on my leg press because I'm just trying to make it a big, juicy movement and train as much muscle as I can. So with that type of movement, I have my feet in a squat stance. I've been wearing my knee sleeves, sometimes my lifting shoes, just to get as much hip and knee closing. I'll support my lower back. You bring the sled down, you bring it up halfway, bring it down again, and then you bring it up to full extension. So those have been in my program for a few weeks now. Pretty high volume, 4 or 5 sets of 10 to 12 reps. So those have been making me sore.
Yeah, I think you mentioned your legs being sore more than I've ever heard.
Yes.
Before.
They were special.
It was at least once, maybe 2 or 3 times a day for the 3 days after that workout.
Yeah, for a long time.
And it kept getting more sore.
Because I was still doing other things. I was doing heavy belt squats. I was doing spin. I had this crazy hard spin class one of the days right after I had one of those leg press workouts. It was so hard. And so I just beat the shit out of my legs. I'll say it that way with all of the fun things that I'm doing. So that's
the context, the previous 4 days leading up to Saturday morning. Then what happened?
I was in the gym doing my little floor routine warm-up. Looks super harmless. It's getting on the ground, doing some transverse abdominal breathing. Then I do some bird dogs, which help me warm up my back. And then I do some Jane Fonda looking things. I do some clamshells, and then I work on some internal and external rotation from the side. And on one of those, there was this zap in my adductor. And I thought I tore my adductor during my floor warm up.
Completely unloaded.
No, yeah, I was laying on the floor.
Just
I was doing internal and external rotations. Yeah, it was just myself. It hurt really bad. It hurt so bad that I was I have injured myself, and I had a hard time standing up off of the floor. I couldn't put weight on it. And, immediately I'm there goes the rest of my lifting career forever, just instantly. Because, you have your idea for your training session and for the future. And now you have this potential new reality of being crippled. And that's what was going on in my head while it was really hurting. And I was feeling like a cramp. There were things about it that felt crampy, but Like there was also, I have no experience of a horrible adductor cramp, so I couldn't, be totally sure. And it also wasn't going away like a cramp tends to over time. So I started walked around quite a bit, and then I walked back into the house. You were working, and I was like, I think I hurt myself. And it was pretty sad. And I tried, oh yeah, before I walked in the house, I had the 45-pound bar out, and I just tried to do some basically floating deadlifts, and I couldn't even get the bar lower than my knee. I was like, okay, well, with an adductor strain, like usually closed stance things, narrow stance things are okay. So I'll just try a regular deadlift stance from the top. And that was a no-no. Like that did not work. It made it worse. And so I got kind of freaked out, and then I walked inside. I really thought I tore it because I didn't think a cramp would be that bad. So
Yeah. And also for further context, you're still in some sense working with or around back injury that happened years ago. And at least my interpretation was that I could see wheels turning.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe catastrophizing would be a little bit too extreme or too strong of a word, but little kind of tendency to lean into, like you said, there goes this whole training block, which has been going really well.
Yeah.
You're back up to deadlifting heavy, belt squatting super heavy, and now in the blink of an eye doing a relatively trivial movement, the rabbit hole becomes like, oh man, is this the next 3-year saga?
Yes. Yeah. It's like, great. No, I'm not going to be able to do anything with my lower body, which is like my favorite thing to do. It's, I go on walks and I lift and I go to spin and blah, 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 blah. It's all out of my life. So I think catastrophizing is the right word.
As an outside observer, I don't want to get too arrogant, while at the same time, I immediately recognize this as being a tweak.
Yeah.
And I'll put it into the tweak column.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I just had the same thing happen to me 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
During my squat warm-up. Very similar precursor situation where the 2 weeks leading up to that workout were horrendous recovery weeks. I was in like a huge sleep debt. Nutrition was off, stress was high, traveling all over the place. And during my warm up, my adductor felt like it was tearing off the bone. So it was a different symptom than I think exactly what you were doing. But I think that this type of tweak, I guess this is the generic bucket I'll put it under, happens. I've had a neck tweak, I've had an adductor tweak, I've had back tweak, I've had shoulder tweak, elbow tweak. Like there's these, whatever reason, the body just goes into hyper protective mode and starts giving you this pain signal, essentially, that feels like a huge injury.
Yeah. I was waiting for it to bruise. Like I was just expecting at any moment to look down and see my whole inner thigh just bruised.
Right. So that's kind of where, without saying I knew, because I didn't know for sure, but what are the things that you go through diagnosing or looking for in either yourself or your clients when something like that happens? When you can, your first step is sort of like, okay, let's just emotionally process the catastrophizing. I think thing one that I try to work with my clients and myself is to let that be okay to be upset, because it's understandable. Even if it's a tweak, the day is still probably for the most part going to be sort of punted on. Even if it's a good tweak that you can kind of start to put some load on it again, you still kind of lost the day, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
Especially when you're all excited. But so I'm curious though, do you have a protocol for determining whether it's some tweak or something more serious?
Well, in that case, it was like I couldn't walk on it. I couldn't do normal things. It was hard to sit down in certain ways. It was hard to put weight on it. And like, that's definitely red flaggy. Otherwise, I would have been like, okay, well, always under the operation of, well, what can you do? Always looking for what can you do? And it seemed like I couldn't do anything with my lower body. So that was kind of like, oh, okay, this is
a bad tweak.
Significant. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just the take 5 to 10% off and
no. Yeah. No.
knock it out.
In fact, I came in and chilled out for a little bit, moped around you, and then I was like, I think it might be okay. So I walked out to the gym and I put on 45s on each side of the bar and tried to deadlift 135 pounds. And it got so much worse. Like, it was so bad. I didn't even think I could walk back into the house.
Yeah.
Like instantly so bad. I couldn't even stand up. So that was not the right thing to do.
This is one of these really interesting aspects of coaching, I think, where you would probably never advise one of your clients to do what you did to yourself.
I don't know.
I think you would have probably approached it different if it was a client who came in. But,
yeah.
It's like programming for yourself.
Yeah.
Something just doesn't work about it. I don't know what it is. Like you could program for 1 million people, then you try to program for yourself or coach yourself through rehab. And depending on your mindset, I mean, I've definitely observed with you, you are a go ham first.
I am a ham goer.
And then fix later kind of person. So in this case, definitely occurred. So what I was trying to do, one was to see whether there was bruising, which is, that's going to be your first indication of whether it's some sort of a muscle belly tear. Blood starts to show near the surface of your skin. Do you have any tingling? Do you have, is it sensitive to the touch? Is there any swelling? It was a little sensitive to touch, but there was no bruising and no swelling at all.
And it still kind of felt crampy. Like, when you have a horrible calf cramp.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like debilitating. It does hurt to touch. It still kind of felt like that. So I was still wondering, like, okay, maybe this is just a terrible cramp.
Right.
So that was still running in the background.
So then the next thing without saying it explicitly, was that I was trying to suggest that, try to see if you can get to increase range of motion or to sit in the position that was kind of causing the symptom and then see how your body reacted. Did it get worse? Were you able to kind of gradually increase the range of motion or to be able to sit on that red line and it relax? And I think that's when you were in the kitchen holding onto the door jamb.
I did like an 8 squat.
An eighth of quarter depth squat, whatever, eighth of a depth squat.
Eighth of a quarter depth.
And it was the first time you went down, absolute no-go. I'm going to die. Never make me do this again. But then you did it again and you sat in there a little bit longer. And that's when I was kind of like, well, what happens if you just sit like in a pause in that position? And I could see even as you were quote unquote pausing, you were slowly actually sinking down a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. And I think you made it within 5 minutes down to full depth squat.
No, because there was at some point where you were like, do you just want to sit and watch some golf for a while? And it was like, yes.
Okay, that's right.
Took some time. I watched the Open.
Yes, that's right.
And I had an ice pack on my leg.
But importantly, though, when you came back up, you did get down to like quarter squat.
I think I did before I sat down. Yeah.
And it didn't get worse.
Yeah.
From doing that. So like there's, to me, big green flags, no bruising, no swelling, no tingling, and gradually moving into and being in the borderline case where the symptoms starts to kind of like, whoa, like, or the body's like, don't do this. But if you just kind of like ease into it, there's a bit of an indication that there's a relaxation.
Which I was totally fighting. I was like, I don't think it's right to do that. And at the same time, I was like, I want to go do my workout. So I was like completely talking out of both sides of my mouth. I was like, there's no way I can get into a squat. But at the same time, I want to finish my workout.
Right. Out loud, you were saying, I can't do this. But then your actions, you would just keep doing it. And I would just sort of like offer an idea and then go back to work. Let you make the choice. And then notice that when you did it, it got a little bit better.
Yeah, that was helpful.
All green flags. If you're listening out there wondering whether you have a tweak, those are all things that I would look for, especially if it's unilateral. If you start having bilateral pain symptoms or swelling or tingling or loss of sensation anywhere, those are all major red flags. But, if you've got just something where it just doesn't feel good, my first inclination is to go down the motion is lotion path. The old Darren Deaton, motion is lotion, especially if it's tendon related, because we've theoretically ruled out a muscle belly tear because there's no bruising. Tendons tend to seem to work well under tension because there's so little blood flow through connective tissue. Generally, I often notice that sitting in a pause, whether it's knees or adductor, sometimes elbow or shoulder, putting in a pause will just allow blood to go. At least that's my mental models. You're getting more blood flow and able to heal or whatever needs to move through faster. Or it could be, my other mental model is that the body is trying to protect itself from getting injured. But if you can sit in that position for a little while, assuming that it's not in this case, based on where we eventually got, don't think there was an actual injury.
I don't think so. I think it was cramping, seizing, and having a bit of a tantrum. And that is something that I tell my clients. It's just like, you need to let your body have its tantrum for a short amount of time.
Right.
And then
I think that was very wise. That once after you went back and tried to deadlift 135. So again, not taking your own coaching advice. Actually did give it a chance to, settle down over a couple holes of the British Open. And then went back out into the garage. Where did it go from there?
Well, I thought I would just try my leg curls. Like that was my really light accessory work of the day. And I was like, well, not feeling confident about deadlifts, not feeling confident about belt squats or hip thrusts. So I'm going to just try my leg curls. And I did those and those felt totally fine. And in the meantime, you were encouraging me to just try some body weight squats and, work on the range of motion.
Right. That's where the range of motion came back.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting one. So you were able to find an exercise that was pretty much zero risk if it was an adductor of pissing it off because you're not using the adductor really much at all.
Yeah.
Even though the adductor...
There's some tension involved, but...
Arguably a hamstring in there, but your toes are pointed totally straight forward. You have, very little abduction and...
Hip wasn't extending.
Hips not moving. Yeah, exactly. So kind of isolating the area of pain from the exercise and doing what you can. Even if that was all you did for the day, I would have considered that a win because you got some work done, pumped some blood through the area. In the meantime, you were establishing range of motion.
Yeah. It's exploring a squat movement. And that seemed to go okay unweighted. Then I tried just like a goblet squat and that felt totally fine. This was like really slow movement too. Like it was a
tempo. Kinda, with a little pause in the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So step 1, evaluate for red flags. Step 2, give it a little time to calm down. Step 3, reestablish range of motion. Step 4, you incrementally started loading it.
Yeah. And this is just probably like 45 minutes after it happened. Something like that. Yeah. Not that long.
And within that period of time, you got to a point, even with goblet squat loading, which was really just like holding plates.
Yeah, I was holding a 25-pound plate. Yeah.
You then thought, well, maybe I could just do some belt squats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, within 45 minutes, going from no more lower body days ever again to let's try some conservative belt squat loading.
Yeah.
So how did you go about picking your loading?
So one thing that I did with my belt squat setup was usually I stack 45s, but I was thinking that it would be better to maintain a narrow stance just to keep that muscle from the normal length that it acts through.
Okay.
So I loaded it with 25s and 10s instead right off the bat and just like one 25-pound plate, did a few reps, tempo, like lots of tempo work, not rushing anything. And then if that felt okay, I put on some more weight. If that felt okay, I put on some more weight and just did a little bit of an increase. I was really trying to stay conservative, which was hard. But I also knew that you can still get really good work with a pause and a tempo. So I didn't feel like a horrendous trade-off, I still felt like I was doing work going up a little at a time, doing some tempo and some pause, and that worked out pretty well. I can't remember what weight I got to, but it was probably like 60% of what I would have gotten to without the pause and the tempo, which is pretty good. And I got to a weight where towards the end of the set, I was like, this is feeling sketchy again. So I was going to do 2 more sets. Instead, I took a bunch of weight off and I did 1 more set. And then it's like, okay, let's see what else. And I never tried the deadlift again, which is okay. but I did try some hip thrusts and those felt totally fine. I just kept them light and with a pause. So definitely played around with getting the full range of motion, conservative with the weight, and working in tempos and pauses.
Right. And so at one point, you thought about doing rack pulls, and that was another part that I tried to nudge towards, again, prioritizing range of motion, because I think your approach or what you were thinking in the moment was, well, maybe I can do more load if it's a partial range of motion. But my approach, or what I was trying to nudge, was reestablishing range of motion first, even if it was very little load, because that's generally my priority when I'm working somebody through, even if it's just an injury. Call it a tweak, call it injury. I would call a tweak a minor, low intensity version of an injury. It's just in the spectrum. My priority is always, number one, reestablish range of motion, and then start increasing the load from there, which is what I think worked out really well in your case. If somebody out there is listening, in this case, we're talking about belt squats, but you can apply the same approach to a barbell squat, low bar squat. I often will give the same advice what you did, which is, you use smaller plates so that you could have a narrower stance, but you can do the same thing with low bar squat. I'll often tell clients to turn their toes forward, because often we'll coach as a starting point 30 to 45 degree angle on their toes so that they can recruit more adductor, but you can do the opposite and have the toes point more forward, and that will kind of reduce the stress on the adductor, which enables you to get down into a full depth squat. And then once you've reestablished that range of motion, start gradually turning your toes out. Maybe in that session, maybe it takes a couple of sessions, depending on how bad the quote unquote tweak is, but you can apply that same methodology.
Yeah.
Similar with if it's a back or shoulder or, whatever, ROM first, then load.
And just knowing, if it is a serious tweak or not, if it is a lack of recovery, or it could be a lack of recovery, either way, the answer was be conservative so that, like you were saying, you can train well again next time.
Right. Move the goalpost on what a win is for the day. So, when you started that day, a win might have been a belt squat PR. You're kind of at belt squat and deadlift, or at least recent PR for deadlift, belt squat, lifetime PR. But after the tweak, move the goalpost to a win for that day is reestablishing range of motion, one, and then any amount of load, really. Any load that gets you to a point where you're moving better than where you started is a win for that day.
Yeah. And leaving, I know I could do more. That's always
Absolutely
something that I tell my clients is don't put it all out there so that you're dragging yourself out and you're not sure. Leave knowing that there's more for next time.
Yes.
It was a really interesting couple of days, and it felt totally normal 3 days later.
Yeah. So by the Tuesday session, now you did work with your coach to make some adjustments, right?
Oh yeah, we took down the volume a pretty good amount on the next leg day, and so we treated it as kind of a recovery leg day, which was fine,
as opposed to what was in the original plan,
which was a
double the volume,
buttload of everything. Yeah.
So a little bit of a reset, and then I'm going to, probably still going to get back on track with progressively overloading from here, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back to a 320, 25 pull tomorrow. Pretty excited to see how it goes.
Right back at it.
Yeah. So, I think it's helpful to know that you will be okay. It's hard when you're facing that moment of, I thought it was going to be this, and I had this future envisioned, and then all of a sudden, it seems like 15 steps back. But nothing is ever as good as it seems, and nothing is ever as bad as it seems when it comes to something like that. So it's just hard in the moment, and allow yourself some wallowing, but then you got to let that be done. Yeah, it was nice to have you as a literal coach there in the moment just to work me through it. So yeah, thank you.
Fortunate that it worked. It's definitely, tenuous.
Yeah.
Because it's high tension, it's emotional, you got to be easy with that stuff, but glad it worked through. And hopefully somebody out there, if you're experiencing a tweak right now, you can take some of this advice, apply it, and continue with your training.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for walking me through that again.
Anytime.
All right.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully it's a scary moment and then a nothing burger, but still a learning experience. Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. If you got some value out of this, and we hope you did, we'd love a review. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you back here next week.
Bye-bye.